It was a quiet autumn morning in Atlanta, Georgia. Gentle sunlight poured through the windows of the math classroom at Riverside High School, casting a golden hue over the worn floor tiles that had borne the footsteps of generations of students. In room 302, the air buzzed with chatter, the scrape of chairs, the soft scratch of pencils against paper, all blending into the familiar soundtrack of a vibrant teenage classroom. But in a quiet corner at the back of the room, a different world existed, still, silent, separate. Jamal Carter, a 13-year-old black boy, sat leaning against the wall near the window, his eyes deep and bright, as if holding entire galaxies within them. His left hand propped up his chin, while his right held a pencil worn down to its nub. But the notebook open in front of him contained only a few scattered lines. At a glance, someone might quickly assume he was daydreaming, disengaged, or simply lazy, but the truth was quite the opposite. Jamal wasn't lost. He was soaring. In his mind, numbers arranged themselves into elegant patterns, mathematical models spun and linked. While his classmates struggled with fractions and basic expressions, Jamal was quietly conquering advanced logic puzzles and higher-level equations, ones he had discovered on his own through old books, the internet, or his boundless imagination. The margins of his seemingly neglected notebook were anything but blank. They were filled with silent evidence of brilliance. Equations, diagrams, endless Fibonacci sequences sprawled across the page like a secret map to a world only he could enter. At the front of the room, Miss Amanda Thompson, an experienced math teacher known for her discipline and sharp instincts, paced slowly with a stack of graded tests in her hand. Each step carried the weight of years of experience and expectation. Her eyes swept the classroom with the precision of a judge delivering a verdict. Today, her face was tight with disappointment. Page after page of test results left her frowning ever so slightly. The grades weren't what she'd hoped for. Was she being too lenient? Had her students grown too comfortable with mediocrity? Then her eyes landed on the back corner, on Jamal, quiet and still as always. She didn't say anything, but her thoughts were already shifting. With a sigh, she made an unexpected decision. "Jamal, could you come up here for a moment?" The room froze. Every eye turned in surprise toward the back. A few students giggled. Others glanced at each other, puzzled. "Him?" someone whispered skeptically. "That kid never even talks." Jamal stood slowly, not rushed, not nervous, as if he'd seen this moment before, just waiting for someone to invite it. He walked to the front, not with the steps of a timid student, but like someone emerging from the shadows into the light. Mr. Thompson picked up a piece of chalk and scribbled a long, tangled equation on the board. Something more suited for a sophomore, not an eighth grader. Jamal stood still, observing. He read it once. No frown, no surprise, just analysis. Then he began to write. His hand moved smoothly, gracefully, like a pianist gliding across keys. The chalk made soft strokes on the board, each step in the solution appearing with steady rhythm, logic, and sharp clarity, as if it had been rehearsed. With every line he added, the room grew quieter. Suspicion faded into awe. By the time he circled the final answer, the entire class was holding its breath. And someone couldn't help but blurt it out. "Holy crap, he actually did it." "That's a genius. What else could it be?" another voice exclaimed. No one laughed now, just stunned silence. Timothy, once the embodiment of strict discipline and control, now looked at Jamal, her expression softer, for the first time. In her eyes, admiration, and maybe even regret. She nodded, gently but meaningfully. As the class settled down, she began handing back the graded tests, each paper delivered with a brief, no-nonsense comment. Pretty good work. You need to review more. Then she reached Jamal's desk. He paused. His test sat at the top of the stack, a bold red 100 circled clearly. This wasn't Jamal's first perfect score, but it was his quiet brilliance, his unspoken excellence, that unsettled her. A student this exceptional, who never spoke, never raised his hand, never asked for anything. She handed him his test. No praise, no reprimand. Her face a calm line, expressionless. But her eyes had changed. She returned to the front of the room, standing tall. She didn't look at anyone in particular, but her voice cut through the room with authority. Listen up, everyone. The chatter stopped instantly. The classroom stretched tight with silence. This time the students looked up not out of obligation, but with real anticipation. And a bit of worry. She set the stack of tests on the desk, leaned lightly against the edge, and scanned the room with a gaze like a laser beam. Most of you did, passively, she said firmly, but too many of you are still struggling with the basic concepts we've been covering for weeks. Jamal didn't react. His chin rested in his palm, eyes drifting toward the window where autumn leaves swayed in the breeze, almost as if calling him to escape the moment. He didn't notice Miss Thompson's sharp eyes gradually locking onto him. This is foundational algebra, her voice rose slightly. You need to master this if you want to make it through high school, through college, or frankly just to survive in life. She paused, her gaze now firmly fixed on Jamal, whose eyes were still lost in the fluttering leaves outside. Jamal Carter. His name rang out like a firecracker in the night. Jamal jolted upright, his hand slipping from his chin. Every head in the classroom turned. His heart pounded, his face flushed hot. Yes, ma'am, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Seems like you're more interested in the view outside the window than the lesson, she said coolly. Anything out there you'd like to share with the rest of us? Jamal pressed his lips together, about to answer, but found no words and let it go. A few students giggled under their breath, but Ms. Thompson's face remained stern. All right, let's see if you've been paying attention. Come up here. The room fell silent. The tension snapped tight like a violin string. Jamal slowly rose to his feet, his chair screeching across the floor. Each step toward the board felt like a mile. Every eye in the room a dagger in his back. Oh man, he's done for, someone whispered. If he solves it, I'll flip my desk. Another tried not to laugh. Jamal swallowed hard. His palms were sweaty. Each step toward the board felt like stepping under a spotlight where no one was safe. Susan stood beside the whiteboard, marker in hand, her face unreadable. Let's see how much you've actually been listening, she said, and began to write a long, tangled equation, full of variables, exponents, fractions, and transformations. It looked more like a maze than a math problem, far beyond what the class had covered. But for someone like Jamal, who had already made a habit of tackling advanced math on his own, it wasn't impossible. Miss Thompson stepped back, extending the marker to him like a challenge. Go ahead, show us what you've got. Jamal took the marker. It was cool against his palm. He stared at the board, at the sea of variables, exponents, and fractions woven into a dense puzzle. The whispers and quiet snickers behind him felt like tiny blades in his back. His heart pounded and his throat was dry. For a split second he thought about giving up, handing the marker back and retreating into the familiar safety of being invisible. But then a voice inside him whispered, "You've solved harder than this. You don't need to prove anything. Just remember who you are." Jamal took a deep breath, raised the marker, and started to write. The room seemed to shrink around him, just him and the whiteboard. The marker felt heavier with each passing second. His eyes scanned the equation again, and the symbols began to fall into place. He started slowly, cautiously, like someone finding their way through a dark tunnel. The class held its breath. Some students waited for him to trip. A few were even betting he couldn't do it. But he kept going. Each step grew more confident. He began breaking down the problem, isolating key points, simplifying fractions, eliminating unnecessary steps. His hand moved faster now, the sound of the marker sweeping across the board like a steady rhythm. No more hesitation, no more shaking. "Wait, he's actually doing it," a girl in the second row whispered, eyes wide. "It's like he's unraveling the whole thing," her friend murmured. No more laughter, only stunned silence. Every eye followed the lines Jamal was writing. At her desk, Ms. Thompson crossed her arms. Her eyes no longer cold, now sparked with curiosity and maybe even admiration. She had always been frustrated by his lack of participation, his seeming indifference. But now, in front of her, stood a student transforming knowledge into something like art. "We're waiting," she said, her voice breaking the near-sacred silence. Jamal lifted his head. There was no fear in his eyes. And his hand kept moving. He wasn't just solving a math problem, he was making a statement. Genius sometimes only needs the right moment to shine. Ms. Thompson's expression began to shift. At first, she had expected Jamal to stumble, maybe veer off track, make a mistake. But each step he took was clear, precise, and logical enough to draw her closer to the board, her eyes fixed on every line. Jamal paused briefly, double-checking each step, a habit born of someone who understands the value of precision, then continued to finish the last pieces. Under the fluorescent lights, the numbers seemed to glow, syncing with the fast, steady beat of his heart. He wrote the final number, circled the answer with a clean, confident stroke. A soft click echoed as he capped the marker and stepped back, turning to face the room. His heart was still pounding, but his face was calm. Behind him, the board was filled with a flawless solution, each line a calculated move, like a grand master's strategy. He hadn't just solved the problem, he had conquered himself. The classroom was dead silent. No whispers, no snickers. The only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Jamal glanced around, meeting wide eyes, open mouths, astonished expressions from classmates who had once looked right past him. Now their stares held something else, respect. Miss Thompson stepped forward, her heels making soft, deliberate clicks across the floor. She didn't speak right away. She simply examined the board, tracing each line with her finger, her lips moving as she checked every transformation. Then she turned to Jamal, her face no longer cold, but softened, blended with surprise and something more. Respect. "You got everything right," she said, her voice lower than usual. A ripple spread through the room. A few claps broke out, then more, and soon the whole class erupted in applause. It wasn't polite or forced. It was real recognition. Jamal stood there, his face flushed. But this time, it wasn't embarrassment. It was pride. A strange, warm feeling, like morning sun cutting through fog. Miss Thompson motioned for quiet and said, "What you just witnessed wasn't luck," she gestured to the board. It was the result of true understanding. Jamal didn't just solve the problem. He broke it apart, saw its core, and worked through it clearly. That is real intelligence. The room fell quiet again, not from shock, but reflection. Jamal felt something shift inside him. He no longer wanted to shrink back into the corner. His shoulders lifted slightly. His eyes looked straight ahead. His arms hung relaxed by his sides. For the first time, he felt seen. As Thompson continued, her voice now unusually gentle. Jamal, why haven't you ever shown this before? If you're capable of this, why sit in the back and stay silent? Jamal looked down at his worn sneakers, silent. How could he explain? That he'd learned to make himself small, that in a world where being different often draws judgment, hiding sometimes feels like survival. After a moment, he just shrugged and whispered, I didn't think anyone noticed. It's time that changed, Miss Thompson said. Her voice no longer held scrutiny, but an invitation to be heard. The sound of applause still lingered in Jamal's ears as he made his way back to his seat. It didn't echo coldly, it warmed him, a sound of real recognition. He sat down, his breath still heavy, but his heartbeat finally settling. The class, still stunned, kept glancing his way, not with indifference or mockery, but with curiosity, respect, and even admiration. Miss Thompson stood at the front, hands clasped, eyes distant. She wasn't the type to be easily impressed, but what Jamal had done wasn't just about solving a math problem. He had shattered her assumptions, not only about Jamal, but about all the quiet, overlooked students she had ever taught. Class, she said, cutting through the whispers, what you saw today is a reminder. Every single person in this room has potential. Jamal just proved that. And it wasn't just about solving the problem. He showed us focus, clarity, and the spirit of discovery. Jamal sat quietly, hands gently gripping the edges of his notebook, the one place where he had always dared to be himself. The numbers that had once hidden in the margins were now the very thing that stunned everyone. A strange feeling crept in, a mix of anticipation and fear. In front of him, a girl turned around, eyes wide. How did you do that? She asked, voice full of wonder. Jamal hesitated. He wasn't used to the spotlight, especially not people asking him questions. I just figured it out, he said softly. Are you, like, a genius? Another student blurted out, genuinely amazed. Jamal blushed, shaking his head quickly. No, I just really like math. The bell rang, signaling the end of class. As students began to pack up, Miss Thompson called out, Jamal, can you stay back for a moment? He nodded slightly, his heart picking up pace again. As his classmates passed, many gave him a pat on the shoulder, a quick, that was awesome, or simply a respectful nod. Jamal gave a small, shy smile, clutching his notebook like a tiny shield. The classroom slowly emptied. Miss Thompson leaned against her desk, her eyes resting on him, not with the usual scrutiny, but something else entirely. Jamal, she began, her voice low and gentle, I owe you an apology. Jamal blinked. Did he hear that right? An apology? She nodded, her face no longer stern, but that of a teacher relearning how to see her student. I've been teaching for a long time. I thought I was good at reading students. But with you, I was wrong. I assumed your silence meant you didn't care. I thought you weren't paying attention. She paused for a moment, as if swallowing a little professional pride to make space for truth. But today, you taught me something else. Silence doesn't mean invisible. Quiet doesn't mean worthless. And being different is something to listen to, not ignore. She took a breath. I used to think you didn't participate because you didn't care. Clearly, I was wrong, she said, her voice soft but unwavering. Jamal shifted slightly in his seat, unsure how to respond. He simply whispered, It's okay, ma'am. No, it's not, she said, shaking her head, eyes meeting his. You have a gift, Jamal, and I don't want to see you hide it. Do you know how rare it is for someone your age to solve a problem like that? Not just solve it, but see it the way you did? Jamal looked down at his worn notebook, running his fingers along the frayed edge of the cover. He mumbled, I don't know, I just like math. It makes sense. The sound of applause still echoed faintly in Jamal's ears as he returned to his seat. But it wasn't cold or distant, it was warm, the sound of being seen. He sat down, his breathing still heavy, but his heart now steady. Around the room, students kept glancing his way, not with indifference or sarcasm anymore, but with curiosity, respect, and even at the front of the room, Miss Thompson stood with her hands clasped, her eyes gazing thoughtfully into the distance. She wasn't easily impressed, but what Jamal had done went beyond solving an equation. He had shattered her assumptions, not just about him, but about every quiet student who goes unnoticed. Class, she said, cutting through the murmurs, what you witnessed today is a reminder. Every one of you has potential. Jamal just proved that. And it wasn't just about getting the answer. He showed us focus, clarity, and a true spirit of exploration. Jamal sat quietly, his fingers gently gripping the edge of his notebook, the one place where he had always dared to show who he was. The numbers he used to hide in the margins were now the very thing that had stunned the class. A new feeling stirred in him, part excitement, part fear. In front of him, a girl turned around, eyes wide. How did you do that? She asked, still in awe. Jamal hesitated. He wasn't used to attention, much less questions like this. I just thought it through, he said softly. Are you like a math genius? Another student asked, genuinely amazed. Jamal blushed and shook his head quickly. No, I just like math. The bell rang, signaling the end of class. As students packed up, Ms. Thompson spoke again. Jamal, could you stay a moment? He nodded slightly, his heart picking up again. As his classmates passed, many patted him on the back. Some said, that was amazing. Others simply nodded with new respect. Jamal gave a shy smile, clutching his notebook like a small shield. The room emptied slowly. Miss Thompson leaned on her desk, her eyes meeting his. Different now? Warmer? Jamal, she began, her voice calm and sincere. I owe you an apology. Jamal blinked. Had he heard her right? An apology? She nodded. Her expression wasn't stern. It was the face of a teacher learning to see her student anew. I've been teaching for a long time. I thought I knew how to read students. But with you, I was wrong. I assumed your silence meant apathy, that you didn't care. She paused, letting the words settle. But today you taught me something different. Silence doesn't mean invisible. Being quiet doesn't mean you have no value. A difference deserves to be heard, not overlooked. She looked him in the eyes. I used to think you didn't engage because you didn't care. I was wrong. Jamal shifted in his seat, unsure how to respond. He simply said, It's okay, man. No, it's not, she said firmly but kindly. You have a gift, Jamal, and I don't want to see you hide it. Do you know how rare it is for a student your age to solve a problem like that? And not just solve it, but see through it the way you did? Jamal looked down at his worn notebook, tracing the frayed edge with his fingers. He whispered, I don't know, I just like math. It makes sense. Mrs. Clance was smiling, not a polite smile, but one of genuine understanding. That's exactly what makes you special. The way you see the world differently is something to be proud of. But Jamal, you can't keep that to yourself forever. There are programs, competitions, even advanced classes, places where your talent can grow. If you want, I'll help. Jamal's heart pounded. That door, the world beyond his comfort zone, was opening. He remembered that moment at the board, when everything had clicked, and how people looked at him differently. "But what if I fail?" he whispered. Miss Thompson's smile softened. "Failure is part of learning, but if you don't try, you'll never know what you're capable of." That evening, Jamal sat at the small kitchen table in his modest home. His notebook lay open in front of him, the pages still fresh from the morning. His parents sat beside him, listening as he recounted the story, how he solved the problem, the applause, and Ms. Thompson's offer. His mother took his hand, eyes shimmering. "I've always known you were special. Now others are finally starting to see it too." His father nodded, voice deep and steady. "This is just the beginning, son. Don't be afraid to show the world who you are." Jamal sat quietly for a moment, staring at the blank page in his notebook. For years it had been a place to hide, to pour his secret world of math, where no one looked, no one judged. But tonight, the page wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was at the beginning. He picked up his pencil and started to write. Not just equations, but ideas, goals, dreams. For the first time, Jamal wasn't afraid of being seen. He was ready to step into the light, to find out just how far his gift could take him. The next morning, room 32 felt different. Jamal Carter, the boy who used to blend into the background, was now at the center of it all. As he walked in, classmates smiled, nodded, even offered high fives. "Yo, Jamal," a boy called from the back. "How'd you do that yesterday? That was insane." Jamal just smiled, natural, easy. He didn't need to hide anymore. Because yesterday the world saw Jamal Carter, and today he began to become himself. He hesitated for a moment, old instincts whispering to keep his head down, but something new stirred in him. Pride. "I just thought about it my way," he said humbly, settling back into his usual seat by the window. "Thought about it? You're like a math wizard," a girl teased, half joking, half in awe. Jamal blushed, shrugged. "Thanks," he replied, quietly but sincerely. What surprised Jamal most was how students who had never noticed him before were now asking questions, not out of shallow curiosity, but real interest. What else was he good at? Could he help them with math? For the first time, Jamal wasn't invisible. Miss Thompson walked into class with her usual brisk energy. But today, when her eyes met Jamal's, there was a flicker of warmth. She started the lesson as usual, but her tone had changed. It was softer, more encouraging. When she called on Jamal to answer a question, her voice held no pressure, just an invitation to share. Jamal hesitated, then answered clearly and confidently. "Did you hear that?" someone whispered. "He sounds like a teacher." Miss Thompson nodded, eyes lighting up. "Excellent. That's the kind of thinking we need more of in this classroom." After class, she asked Jamal to stay again, but this time not to apologize. This time to open a door. "Jamal, I've thought a lot about our talk yesterday. You have a real gift, and I can't let it go to waste." Jamal looked down at his notebook. For the first time, he knew he was listening to something more than just praise. I don't know what to do with it," he admitted. "That's why I'm here," she smiled. "There's an advanced math program through the district, 2 afternoons a week after school. It's for students who need more challenge. I think you'd be perfect for it." Jamal's eyes widened, excitement and anxiety tugging at each other. But am I really good enough? You don't need me to tell you you're good enough. You've already proven it, Miss Thompson said. I've spoken to the program coordinator. They're excited to meet you. Jamal's heart pounded again. He remembered the whiteboard, the applause, his parents' eyes filled with pride. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. The following week, Jamal walked into his first advanced math class. The nervousness felt exactly like it had the day he stood at the board. But this time, it wasn't about defense. It was about discovery. The room buzzed with energy. Students from different schools, sharp eyes, competitive spirits, but not cold ones. As the lesson began, Jamal realized he belonged here. Challenging problems, fast-paced discussion, enthusiastic debates. For the first time, Jamal felt like he was among peers who spoke his language, and he felt happy. Back at Riverside, the name Jamal Carter was no longer buried in the attendance list. He had become the math kid, not just the smartest in the room, but the one people turned to, not just because he had the answers, but because he had once been the quietest one in class, and now he stood as living proof that anyone can shine when given a chance. From nearly invisible, Jamal had become an essential part of the classroom. His calm demeanor, sharp thinking, and quiet passion inspired those around him. Even Ms. Thompson, once too focused on surface-level performance, changed the way she saw her students. Jamal's transformation reminded her not every gift announces itself loudly. Sometimes the rarest gems sit buried in the quietest places, waiting for someone patient enough to notice. From then on, she began spending more time with quiet students, the ones who avoided eye contact, encouraging each one to step into the light in their own way. One evening, Jamal sat at the familiar kitchen table, working through a tough problem for his advanced class. The soft yellow light bathed his notebook, filled with complex numbers and expressions. His mother walked in, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, Jamal," she said, softly. "You've always been special. I'm just glad the world's finally starting to see it, too." Jamal looked up, a quiet smile forming on his lips. "Thanks, Mom," he replied, then turned back to his notebook. His pencil hovered for a moment, not over the problem, but over something deeper. For the first time, Jamal realized he wasn't just solving problems for himself anymore. He was building a future. With every equation, every opportunity, every step forward. And as he wrote the final line of his solution, a light and steady feeling settled over him. Confidence. He didn't know exactly where the road ahead would lead, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to walk it, ready to shine. Have you recognized your own light yet? Step out of the shadows, from the place where you've hidden your talents and dreams, because just like Jamal, the world might be waiting to see you shine. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, so every day you'll receive thoughtful lessons, heartfelt stories, and deep, lasting inspiration.